With over a decade of gardening experience, I've come to learn a few truths that no one talks about. And today I'm going to share 5 of those with you. Hi, it's Steph. And in no particular order, we will start with number 1, gardeners don't sit. It's true. You have this beautiful garden with these little spaces that you've created to relax in, and as soon as you sit down, you will find a plant that needs deadheading, some weeds that need pulling, maybe something that needs water, or you'll spontaneously decide to rip out a plant because you no longer like it, or decide to move something because you found a better spot. And that is the end of your relaxing in the garden. And I have found this to be a common trait amongst gardeners. In fact, just last summer when I visited landscape designer Andrew Grossman, I asked him this very same question. Do you get to sit and enjoy your garden? And here's what he had to say.
So pretty. Do you sit here often?
I don't sit in the garden much.
No, I don't think any of us gardeners.
I only
sit
do
enough.
when people come.
Yeah.
When friends come over, I sit in the garden. Otherwise, I almost never do.
Right. That is a problem with us gardeners, isn't it? We are just gluttons for work. We see a weed, we pull it here, we pull it there, and before we know it, it's time to go in for the night.
And just like Andrew, I also find myself mostly relaxing and enjoying my garden when a friend comes to visit or I'm doing a tour of my gardens. This is when I can really relax and appreciate all of the work that I have done. So let me know if this is something that you find in yourself as well. I even had this conversation with my husband, George, who helps me out in the garden quite a bit. And when the weather gets nicer, we will often make a cup of coffee and sit in our Japanese maple garden in our cozy garden room that we created on the channel last season. And as we're drinking our coffee, we're getting to enjoy the views of the garden. But as soon as that coffee is done, we are off and working. George will go ahead and prune something. I will go find something that needs weeding. And there goes the end of the relaxing and sitting in the garden. I even find myself doing this in friends' gardens. I will go visit and I will see a daylily that needs deadheading. And those are really easy because you just snap off the spent blooms. And I will start cleaning up their plants or start weeding if I see weeds that need to be pulled. I even catch myself doing this at local garden centers and nurseries when I go and visit, cleaning up their plants. If I see a plant that needs help, it is my duty to clean it, which means there will be very little sitting in the garden. Truth number 2, if you want a beautiful garden, there is no such thing as a no maintenance landscape. Now sure, you can have a landscape that just consists of a couple of evergreen shrubs and a lawn that needs to be cut once a week. But if you really like the look of beautiful flower beds that offer lots of color and texture to your landscape, that is going to involve a little bit more work. Now, the amount of work is going to depend on the garden aesthetic that you're most drawn to. If you like the aesthetic of something like a cottage garden that is a little bit wild and more free form with plants in varying heights, color, and texture growing really close together, that's going to require a little less maintenance. But if you're drawn to a formal garden that has lots of hedges like boxwood that need to be clipped to keep that nice tight shape, that type of garden is going to require more maintenance. Now, if you're looking for a lower maintenance landscape, there are a few places that you can look for inspiration. One of those being your local bank. Any type of business or commercial real estate will have plants in their landscape that are tough as nails. These plants need to survive really hot, extreme conditions with very little water and very little care. So for that reason, if you see plants out there that you like, they might be a good plant to add to your garden. Things like junipers that are really drought tolerant and evergreen, some spireas that are shrubs that will also offer some blooms, perennials like Stelladora daylilies, and even landscape shrub roses like the knockout or the drift rose. An example of this that I have in my own garden is several years ago, I had gone to Starbucks and I noticed that they had this really compact, upright growing ornamental grass. And I really liked the aesthetic of it. So I took a picture and I used my Google Lens on my phone to determine that it was a Carl Forester grass. And I have since added a few of these to my landscape and I really love them, and they are virtually no maintenance, except for cutting them down at the end of the season. And if you do want to have a lower maintenance landscape, opting to plant things like trees and flowering shrubs as opposed to flowering perennials, which will require more deadheading, is also a great way to go. I have a hedge of little lime hydrangeas here in my garden that all I have to do to that row of shrubs is prune it and fertilize it in very early spring, and it blooms beautifully for me from June all the way through the end of October with no extra work on my part. Some other things to consider when planning your lower maintenance landscape is things like edging and mulching. When it comes to edging, if you have a gradual curve on your planting beds, it will make it a lot easier to mow against when mowing the lawn. And if you have edging material like cobblestones or metal edging, it will also require additional maintenance because after you're done mowing, you will have to go back through and weed eat or weed whack against those surfaces versus having a natural edge where you just have to go through and clean it up with a shovel or a half moon edger once a season. And mulching is a really important aspect of having a lower maintenance landscape. By having an adequate amount of mulch on your planting beds, it will conserve moisture and it will also reduce the amount of weeds that you get. So while there is no such thing as a no maintenance landscape, if you want to have beautiful gardens around your home, with some proper planning, you can have a lower maintenance landscape. Truth number 3, don't bite off more garden than you can chew. It's easy to get carried away when expanding your garden. Each new bed that you add requires more planting, more watering, more weeding, and more maintenance. If you take on too much, what once brought you joy can become overwhelming. Several years ago, I joined my local garden club, and I was having a conversation with one of the seasoned members of the group. I had expressed to her my desire to expand my landscape and to add more planting beds, and she shared some really wise words with me that came from a place of experience. She said, don't over garden your property to the point where it becomes unmanageable later in life. And I thought that these words were really wise. And each time that I think about doing a new planting project or expanding my gardens, I remember this conversation. Because while my husband George and I are still able to maintain our property by ourselves, we know that that can change from year to year. And things may look different 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. So we try to always plant our garden in a way that we are going to be able to maintain it for as long as possible. And how much time and energy you have to dedicate to your garden is always going to be something that you need to consider to make sure that you don't bite off more garden than you can chew. Truth number 4, plants will die, and that's part of gardening. No matter how much experience you have, plants will inevitably die. And it's okay, it's part of the process. It could be that the plant was planted in the wrong spot. Maybe it didn't like its light conditions, or it didn't get enough water. Maybe it got too much water. It could be that the plant got diseased or invaded by pests, or maybe the weather was unpredictable. Any of these reasons could have been the cause of your plant's death, but they are all an opportunity to learn. Each plant you lose teaches you something. It teaches you about the soil, about the light conditions, and what not to do next time. Losing plants can be humbling for experienced gardeners and can be really frustrating for newer gardeners. But each plant that we lose teaches us how to be resilient in our gardens. And over time, from the lessons that we learn, hopefully we will kill less plants. Truth number 5, you will always want more plants, even if you don't have the space for them. Regardless of how much space you have in your garden, whether you have a large garden or a small garden, when you visit a nursery or garden center, there will be plants that you need to bring home, even if you have no place to plant it. This happens to the best of us. We will find a plant at a nursery that we simply must have, and we bring this plant home and we walk around the garden with it in our hands, looking for the perfect spot where we can squeeze just one more plant. And this happens to most gardeners that I know. And it is just such a addicting hobby, and it can get expensive and out of hand quickly. So if you have this compulsion, you may be tempted to remove more lawn and open up more planting space just to accommodate those new plants that you purchased. But be warned, that will not stop, and you will forever be finding plants that you just need to add, even if you have no space. Let me know what your thoughts are on these 5 truths, and if you have any more that you can add to the list. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I'll catch you in the next one.